All right, it's the ITRBoxing weekend recap. It's your boy Dakota. I'm here with my guy Nibs. Nibs, I know you've been a little under the weather this week. How we feeling now, bro?
Man, I'm living, brother, but that COVID ain't no motherfucking joke. You know what
No,
I
it's
mean?
not.
Nah, and this the technically the fourth time I've had it, bro. The the
God damn.
first time, yeah, the first time was the worst. Like that shit put me out. Like I wasn't ready for it at all. The next two times I barely even knew I had it. You know what I'm saying? And this third time was more like the first time. It was like, yeah, I'm gonna tell you something for all of y'all out there who don't think COVID is real or is we are out of it. I'm a living testament. That shit is back, and with a vengeance.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, bro. I'm glad you're feeling a little bit on the other side. Shout out our guy Jesus. I'm always pulling up. Good to
What
see
up?
you, brother. Um, Lot to get
How
into
you
this
feeling,
week.
by the way? How you
I'm
feeling, by the way, bro?
I'm
I
I'm
didn't
feeling
ask.
fantastic. I'm feeling fantastic, bro. I'm feeling fantastic. I'm here. Wow. That's a hot way to start, bro. In a way, garbage with his stay busy bouts. I
Come
mean,
on now.
listen,
Come on.
it's a little early for that, Jesus, but I like you coming in with the energy as you always do. Let's get right into Inoue because I've seen mixed reactions to this performance. Listen, the last at least 4 or 5 fights, I feel like Inoue is fighting the best guys available, the best guys in his weight. And in this particular instance, he took probably like the sixth or seventh best guy, had a couple of slower rounds, but once he really hit the gas pedal, it felt like he showed his levels as he always does. What was your initial reaction to this performance, Nibs?
I mean, I guess my question is other than moving up or down in weight to fight a bigger name, because he's beaten everybody else that really matters in his current weight class, right? So I don't know what you want from him. Like, he's fighting the next man up, and and he put on a show. Like it's not like he came in there, did some lackluster bullshit, and just got out of there with a win, right? He beat a quality guy, stopped him. You know what I'm saying? With
I
a
mean,
vicious body.
he hit him so hard with a body shot that he threw his back out. I've never seen that in my life, and I can't even imagine how that must have felt. And Doheny came in, I think, with a decent game plan. I thought he was doing some good shit with the foot feints. He was really sitting down on shots, and I think that he got Inoue's respect a little bit with his power, particularly in light of the Neri fight where he gets dropped in the first round. So I felt like
Right.
Doheny did a good job of keeping Inoue honest and in check early in the fight. But once Inoue found that rhythm, he's just such a handful. What did you think of some of it seemed like his difficulty initiating offense early? Did you think that was him like kind of having a hard time, or do you think he was just getting a look and taking in the information?
I think he was downloading the information. I don't think Inoue has a hard time when he's in the ring at all, right? You might be able to catch him because he is there to be hit. At times if you time it right, you can catch him with something, right? Just like Neri did. However, whenever he's not throwing punches, that doesn't mean you're out of danger. That means he's downloading what you're giving to him. And then he's going to come around and do what he does to people. I mean, again, we saw it in the Stephen Fulton fight, right? It was like the only difference was he was doing it real time again and against, and I think he did that to prove a point, right? We all got it. I think with this, he knew he was never going to really be in any trouble, so he kind of sat back, and then when he decided to turn it up, you saw what happened. You know what I'm saying? I think it's almost, and I hate that I have to always go back to this, but I relate it to the Floyd Mayweather effect. He's so dominant that he makes it look easy against quality, tough opponents. And then we all go, well, he's boring because he's dominating everybody. Well, that's the beautiful part of it. You know what I'm saying? He's dominating because he's that much better than the guys he's fighting, not because they're trash. It's just he is the monster. He is in a way. So I mean, you look at his little brother. I mean, even his little brother's having a time right now. I mean, it's a good time to be in
Takuma's
that
a good
family.
fighter, bro. Takuma's a good fighter himself.
That's what I'm saying. Like it's a family thing, just like the Mayweathers, like the Canelos. People don't give Canelo's. upbringing enough credit for what it is. His whole family is fighters. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
When you have that, you know, it makes you that much better. And you see Inoue. I mean, you can tell it's like he wakes up and it's like he could probably beat most guys without a training camp. That's how good he is. You know what I'm saying? And it's just it's fucked up because now people are nitpicking him for looking so good against. Let's face it, you know, the guys that he's facing, they face each other. Some of those are most of them actually are 50-50 fights. You know what I mean? That's all
Yeah,
I'm
and I
saying.
think, you know, I think ultimately, if people have any hesitation about this performance, it's how long it took in a way to get going. And if there's anything I could compare it to, it's that as Lomachenko moved up in weight, starting at 126, when he got up to 135, he started consistently being the smaller guy, and it took him longer to let his hands go because he was waiting for the zip to come off your shots a little bit, and that can make it a little harder to win decisions. So that's the only thing I'm seeing is he's still the same guy, but as these guys are good, Doheny's a big guy. You know what I mean? I think he's like 5'7". He's pretty wide, big legs. Like, you know, that's a guy where he may wait a couple rounds to really open up. And you just wonder at what point does he hit that ceiling? I don't think it's at 122, but maybe we're starting to see a little bit of that.
I mean, it's they got weight classes for a reason, right? I mean, we look at Terrence Crawford. He gets up to 154, and he's nowhere near as dominant in his first, you know, run at 154 as he was at 147. Why? Because people forget he was at 130 at one point. Now he's fighting at 154, and these are some big back motherfuckers at 154, bro. We're not talking about little dudes. Most of those guys walk around 175, 180 plus, right? You look at 122, 126, 130, most of those guys are walking around 140, 150. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Even some of them get down or go up as high as 160 when they're not in training camp.
I mean, shit, imagine guys like Ray Vargas and Espinoza who are 5'11" and 6 foot plus. You know, I'm sure those guys get up to at least 150 pounds. I think that also all this speaks to how highly people think of Inoue, where he's just been so dominant. He wipes Fulton out. He wipes out. Now, of course, I'm forgetting his name, but the Filipino fighter that he beat, or the Thai fighter he beat. Um, you know, he's just beating guys up, man. And now he splits the first 4 rounds with a tough veteran, and then comes on strong and knocks him out with a body shot that throws his back out. And that's not enough for people. That's how good this guy is, I think. You know what I mean?
It's like Tank Martin comes back, you know, from or Tank Davis. I'm sorry, Tank Davis comes back and fights Frank Martin, and people were giving him shit for not winning every single second of the fight. And it's like, yeah, but did you forget the spectacular knockout that he got? Like,
Just to
you know what I mean?
to pay respect to the world champion he beat, just because I had a brain fart. The guy was Marlon Tapales, who was fresh off a win over MJ Akhmadaliev. That was legitimately the #2 guy in the weight, the only other guy with a belt. So listen, I think that there's a couple of things to just take notice of in this fight, but as a whole, I think Inoue is still a force of nature, really. If he stays at 122, and we were talking about this the other day, Jesus makes a great point. Sam Goodman was next man, but probably gives him a better bout. Sam Goodman's a good choice. MJ Akhmadaliev, I think, is still a legitimate opponent, even though he lost to Tapales. There's a level of pedigree and versatility to him that I would love to see in a way clash with. And then there's, of course, the potential for Junto Nakatani, who's also very tall. I think he's 5'10" or so, you know, moving up to 122 pounds in what would probably be the biggest fight in Japanese history. If I'm wrong, someone leave that in the comments, but it would be a massive fight everywhere, and particularly over there. Do you feel like you want to see him finish up business at 122, or are you ready to see how Inoue fares at maybe a slightly more exciting 126?
I think he's done what he needed to do at 122, in my opinion, right? I think you're the unified champion. You've beaten the best in that class. If he wants to have another go at 122, or like you said, let's say he wants to wait for, Nakatani to move up, because I think what you're saying is, yeah, as far as an all Japanese fight, that's about as good as it gets.
That's a
I
super
think
fight. That's a super fight.
right over there. Over here, maybe not so much, right? For us, you, me, people in the boxing world who bleed this shit, then yeah, this is, sign me up. If he wants to be a superstar, if he wants to make the Tank Davis money, the Ryan Garcia money, the Devin Haney type money, I think he's got to come over here, bro. And he's got to fight guys that people here know, or at least get on cards here. You know what I mean? You can fight Nakatani here. You know what I mean? You both come here.
They never would, though, bro. There would be no reason to. I mean,
I
they
get
can.
that.
There really would be no reason to. I think ultimately, Inoue is going to fight in Japan until there's somebody that's a big enough name that can lure him out of there and into, a new market. But he's LeBron James over there, and Nakatani's like Kevin Durant. So we're talking about the two biggest athletes in a pretty big sports country, coming together. I just think it would be a tremendous event. Obviously, it wouldn't get the coverage that it would deserve here because it would probably be at an inconvenient time. But as far as just pure athletics, I feel like I want to see him fight Nakatani before he moves up. And potentially, Bam Rodriguez might not be far behind either. We don't know how long that's going to take before he's in the same weight neighborhood. So I feel like there's more, I guess, future super fights at 122, and 126 is still going to be there.
I look at it like this. Inoue is not getting any younger, right? People forget he's been in this game for a while. He's getting up there. His window of prime is closing, right? Why not go up to 126? You can make more money there, right? And let's be clear. Most people are probably tired of waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to watch his fucking fights. You know what I'm saying? So there's that. In addition to that, right? Yeah, like you said, over there in Japan, when we say over there, he's, like you said, LeBron James. But that money could be dwarfed by the amount of money he could make coming over here and making a super fight with one of our guys, right? As big as Nakatani is for me, you, and everybody else in the boxing world in Japan, right? He comes over here, he does a fight against any guy with a belt at 126. I guarantee you he doubles his purse.
I don't know, man. I think you underestimate just how much of a buy him and Nakatani would be in Japan. I mean, there's some fun guys at featherweight. There's Angelo Leo, there's Brandon Figueroa, there's Rafael Espinoza, Robesi. There's a lot of exciting guys. Nick Ball, of course, Venado is still in the mix. You got our guy Ronnie Rios, so I just had on the Slip and Weed podcast, getting ready to fight Nick Ball. So there are some guys. I don't know that there's any superstars there at the moment, the way Nakatani and Bam are. So that's where I think he has to kind of figure out, I guess, what he wants to do, and if he feels comfortable fighting at a bigger weight than the one he's at now.
It's not so much the bigger stars at 126. It's the bigger purses. You know what I'm saying? So for me, yeah, you fight wise, you don't get much bigger than him and Nakatani. Period. Right? Like, unless he comes over here to fight Tank, he's that's the biggest fight, right? Let's be clear. But you could come over here and fight one of those guys you just talked about, which are all, we got 4 belt holders at 126, right? You can come and fight any of those guys and make more money. And now that gives you an audience that you really haven't tapped into at all. Really, the only reason most Americans know him is because of what he did to Steve Fulton, right? But you did that to Steve Fulton at 5 o'clock in the morning. You see what I'm saying? You come over here, do one fight in Vegas. I guarantee you, and you put on that kind of performance, you put on a Stephen Fulton type of performance one time here, there will be people waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning with their cup of coffee, happy as shit, to pay that money to watch you fight Nakatani next.
Who's that guy at featherweight that gets you excited to see him move up?
Any of them. because, and I say, and I'm not saying that as a cop out, but stylistically, you know what I mean? Like all the guys at 126 with a belt are going to try to get in there and bang with Inoue. Sign me up for that, bro. Like there's not really one of them that's going to kind of try to pull some, let me just box him type shit. Nick Ball would be great, and they're about the same fucking size. You know what I'm saying? I think Inoue
That
knocks
kid's a
him out like
fucking
3
brick,
rounds,
bro. Nick Ball's a fucking brick.
But he's gonna do what Nick Ball does, which is pressure, come forward, and try to land his shit, which is gonna play right into, in a way, putting him to sleep. You know what I mean? It is what it is. But again, would you watch that in a Vegas fight as a headliner or a co-main event of a fight here? Yes. And then again, he puts on a great performance here against really, there's no one at 126 I would have beating him. You know what I mean? In a fight. He comes over here and puts on a Stephen Fulton type performance, then you can go back to Japan and do whatever the fuck you want because you're going to carry those fans over. People who, and boxing fans will wake up or stay up late for a guy they know. Nobody knows in a way right now, except for, again, diehard boxing fans.
Yeah, and also I think it's diehard boxing fans, and also I think the casual sports fan in Japan, and I'm sure in certain other parts of East Asia. But I think ultimately too, us as Americans, it's like we think he's great. Like we want the fans to say, like me as a super fan, I want everybody to know about this guy. It's not just that I think like, oh, it's not important if it's not here. For me, it's like, no, I want people to really see how fucking special this cat is.
But think about it, right? Remember in Donaire, hell, even Anthony Joshua, until he started fighting Klitschko, right? Until he got the Klitschko fight, nobody knew who he was over here, right? The second you fight a guy we know, or you fight a guy from the States, then boom, you're on the stage. And I think even fighting a guy like Fulton, even though we know who he is, he wasn't a big enough box office name here to get in a way the fans that he needs to be. I mean, again, like you said, he's a rock star in Japan. He could be a rock star here if he fought someone here.
He could be like Manny was. Manny was obviously the biggest thing in the Philippines, but Manny was also the biggest thing in boxing, particularly in that couple of year period when Floyd was retired. There was nothing bigger than Manny Pacquiao. The Keji says, you think Inoue is like that? He looked pretty human the last two fights. Yeah, but you got to keep in mind, Neri was, the next guy up legitimately. That guy hits hard as shit. He's fast as shit. And then Inoue ultimately dominated the fight. I just think we do hold him to a high standard because he is for real a top 5 pound for pound guy anyway you slice it. And so, of course, as a superstar, he gets judged a little differently.
He threw a guy's back out with a body punch.
That's insane, bro.
What more does he need to do? Like, yeah, he's like that. And, and I'm not trying to talk shit. I'm just saying, like, if you hit somebody in their gut and that makes them throw their back out, you like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's different. I have you ever seen that before? I couldn't recall ever seeing, I can't think of someone getting hit and their back gets thrown out.
I mean, we see delayed reactions to body punches all the time because, sometimes it takes a second for the body to report to the brain, right? Like what was it, the De La Hoya when he got knocked out by B-Hop? You know what I mean? He got hit with that vicious body punch. And you could see him telling himself to get the fuck up. He's punching the ground like, I got to get up. And his body's like, nah, man, nah, it's a wrap. It's over. He shut down. I think that's what happened. This dude got hit and his body was like, wait a minute. We ain't never felt that before. I'm out of here. You feel me? It's vicious shit, bro. I think maybe Roy did it once, against a lower level guy, but never at a guy, that's championship level or at least, a B+ type fighter.
And we've been talking about Inoue for almost 20 minutes. I just briefly want to shout out TJ Doheny, who's been a guy that's been in with the very best of his era. Yeah. Inoue, Danny Roman. There's been multiple champions that this guy's been in with. So he's been a take all comers type of guy. And we always need more of that in boxing. Real quick, I don't know if you got to see any of the undercard, but a young champion named Yoshiki Takei got a really tough decision over Daigo Higa, and this had fight of the year written on it for me. Takei is a flawed guy. He gets hit a little. He's a little straight up in the air sometimes on the inside, but he's got some fucking charisma on him, and he's got some balls on him, and he knows how to fucking come back. And this was just a back and forth, fun ass fight. It's one of those sick day fights where you put on a classic. Any thoughts on this one and what potentially could happen for Takei moving forward?
I like Takei, but I think if he continues the way he's going now, he's going to run into somebody that's going to be able to put him on his ass, bro. That's just me. It's just from what I'm seeing right now. He's one of those guys, though, that you're going to love to watch no matter what he does. Like, no matter who he's fighting, I want to watch it because of the way he fights. But if he keeps going this way, he's going to get put on his ass. So I'd like to see him a little bit more defensively responsible, but you can say that about most punchers. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, I mean, good win.
You can hear he hits hard as shit. And listen, anytime a guy's 10 fights into their career and they're the WBO world champion, that says something about their quality. I don't think at least for me, I'm not assessing him as a potential pound for pound guy, but he's impressive. He's a lot of fun. And it truly, in my opinion, was a classic as far as action fights go. And Ego was able to make those veteran adjustments, and then Takei almost knocks him out in the last round. It was a beautiful fight, man. I really enjoyed it.
The same. I mean, I think people sleep on the smaller weights. You know what I mean? So a lot of times people don't even watch them because unless there's a big name guy in there, and I think that again, it just leads to the bias we have as American sports fans. Tune into these little fights, man. I'm telling you, like. I used to tell people all the time, I'd tell anybody who would listen, I would watch the fights on Telemundo because Mexico has a whole bunch of these smaller weight fights, right? But they're super fucking entertaining. Like, these guys are throwing a million punches a fucking round. Most of them, have got granite chins, but, softer punches. But when you get a guy who can actually hit or two guys that can crack and they're just in there winging punches, oh, bro, you got to love that shit.
I mean, there's an interesting, I know they're all Japanese guys, but there's a pretty interesting lineup of champions at bantamweight right now. One of them being Takei, one of them being Junto Nakatani, the third being obviously the brother of Naoya, Takuma Inoue. And there's another champion who I've only seen once, Ryosuke Nishida. Again, another talented young champion. This is a weight class that, again, obviously we're talking about a more insular market, but there's some good fights to be made at this weight with some really good champions. I think it would be interesting, actually, if Takuma and Junto Nakatani were to fight. I think it would make a fight with Naoya even bigger. And I think that would be a lot of fun. But there's some fun matchups at this weight.
Bro, if Junto and Inoue's little brother fought and Junto knocked out Inoue's little brother, I would be afraid to fight in a way after knocking his brother out. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, shit. Because they take that shit serious, bro. Like that whole familial thing. Oh, you knocked my brother out? Oh yeah, I'm finna whoop your entire ass.
Yeah, bro. I don't think Takuma's a slouch though. He's a tough fucking guy. He's got a tough fight coming up against Seiya Tsutsumi. That fight's no joke. Tsutsumi was in like fight of the year last year. Unfortunately, his opponent passed away after the fight because it was fucking brutal. But he's got a tough fight coming up, and I mean, him and Nakatani would be a fun fight, anyways.
Takuma is another guy. He doesn't have a lot of knockouts, but he's got underestimated power. Like, he's got that power that can make you think twice, not necessarily stop you, but make you go, oh shit, I can't rush this dude. You know what I'm saying? But let me try to get my offense off. But he's definitely, and I wouldn't say he's a slicker boxer, but he depends more on his boxing than Inoue does because he doesn't have. He
is a little bit more of a back foot fighter at times. He's a little bit more of a counter puncher. He's a slippery guy. In some instances, he sits in the pocket, but in general, he's slightly less hittable. He's just not as offensively explosive. He can't just he can't throw your back out with a body shot. So he does have a pretty broad skill set, and you know, again, like I said, him and Takei would be a fun fight. There's some fun fights at this weight.
And he's got a really good chin. He's been put on his ass before, but he gets up, almost immediately, from those, and then it's almost like he becomes a much better version of himself after you know what I mean? Like it wakes him up. Like he gets cracked and he's like, oh shit. And then he goes back to whatever the game plan was, and he's a really good, like you said, a technician. Like he knows where the punches are supposed to be, he's very defensively responsible. So I don't think it would be a blowout fight. Like I wouldn't necessarily put all my eggs in the Junto box, if he fights, little Inoue. So I think that's actually a really good fight at that weight.
We didn't have too much going on this weekend, but we did have a fun little MVP, most valuable prospects card. A couple standouts from that. I just want to give some props to real quick. Cuban Kevin Brown getting a pretty impressive 10-round decision over John Bauza, who had a lot more experience than he did. Henry Cedeno, a very impressive guy, beats Enrico Gogoja. And then just prior to that, Yoelvis Gomez, who I haven't seen since his loss to Marquise Taylor, beating Diego Ferreira in a pretty impressive fight. For me, Brown really stood out on this card. I liked his timing. I liked his patience. The only fight that I've even seen Bauza in is, I believe, the loss to Richardson Hitchens. And to see Brown, basically win every round of this fight in his sixth fight was very impressive to me.
I was actually working, so I haven't actually had a chance to go back and watch that, which I actually do plan on. But I've seen Kevin Brown before, so I'm always kind of impressed with him. So I definitely am interested in actually seeing how that whole thing worked out. I did see the results, but I haven't actually watched the fight, so I'd have to lean on you for that as far as how he actually looked in the fight, though.
Hey, Suzanne asks, how do you rate Kevin Brown? Again, he's one of those Cuban guys where I'm guessing, I'm going to go ahead and assume he had a longer amateur career because he's 30 years old, and that was his sixth pro fight. I like his timing. I like his patience. I like his accuracy. I feel like when he really lets his hands go, he lands really clean. And there's a lot to like. I want to see him at another level, and 140 is, a brutal weight class right now. You got to really go through the gauntlet to kind of move up the ranks at that weight. An interesting fight to me. I mean, I don't know. I may not be the weight would be dead on, but it would be kind of interesting to see him and Andy Cruz getting on at similar points in their professional careers, at least. But they should continue moving this guy like they're moving him. He's already fighting, top 25 veterans. And it was a good win for him. He says Tim Tszyu versus Bakram Murtaliev on October 19th, first pre-PBC Amazon card. It's about time, bro. I mean, they've done, I don't know how many cards PBC has done in 2024 calendar year, but it can't be more than 5. And they've all been pay-per-views. I'm not as familiar with Murtazaliev. I think I'm getting that right. I'm not as familiar with him, but I know that he's a world champion, and I'm happy to see Tim Tszyu getting back in the ring against some quality opposition. We'll definitely cover that more as we get closer to the date. As far as some of the fights next week, I just wanted to briefly, before we get into Canelo and Edgar Berlanga, I just briefly wanted to give some shine to Joe Sean James taking on Lester Martinez in the middle of the week on Pro Box. We're big Joe Sean guys here, right? Like we were talking about having him on the prospect list, and if anything, I think we had a hard time putting him in the top 10, really, because I feel like he's already kind of a contender. And Lester Martinez is a bit of a contender himself, having gotten a decision win over Carlos Gongora. This is a great fucking matchup, bro.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very high on Joe Sean, and he's got my money. You know what I mean? Like if I'm betting, on him. I think he's another one of those guys where he's at right now. I think if he continues on the trajectory we all believe he's going to go on, 5 years that dude's going to have a strap, easy. Just in my opinion. So I'm really excited to see what he's got going on in this fight, and I think he's gonna. My personal opinion, I think he'll win easy. Tim, my favorite at 154. I can't argue with that. The Keggies, saying Tim's his favorite at 154. I mean, shit, he's a lot of people's favorite at 154. You know what I mean? If it wasn't for that like hellacious gash he got on his face, he'd probably still be a champion at 154.
I don't know if PBC pays Amazon. I'm going to go ahead and assume yes. I mean, they have to be getting some kind of revenue from it if it's a percentage of the pay-per-view or if they did a lump sum up front. Don't know the details on that. But again, I think that one of the things that has been a recurring topic, and apologies, of course, we have a technical difficulty now and then. I'm doing my fucking best. But I think the main issue with the pay-per-view model right now is it feels like basically every fight that moves the needle is behind not just one but two paywalls. And I just don't think that grows the sport, man. It just doesn't grow the sport. The way to grow the sport is to make it accessible. And it's just not entirely practical. Before I glitched out, we were going to talk about Joshon James and Lester Martinez. Nibs, what are your thoughts on that matchup?
Well, while you were in Glitch World, I said this, basically that, Joshon's got my money, and that, if we're picking fighters, I'm picking him to win the fight, and I think he actually wins pretty easily, in my opinion, because of where I think his talent is going to take him. Again, that's no knock, against any opponents he has coming up, but I think he's the true fruit right now, bro.
Yeah, he's a handful. He's tall. He's one of those rise to the occasion kind of guys. And I think that Martinez caught Gongora kind of on the back end a little bit. But it's a great matchup. You got two unbeaten, tough guys that are trying to make good fights happen. And to me, those are the guys that really move the needle, are young guys like Joshon James, like Troy Isley, like Lester Martinez, like Andy Cruz, young fighters that are really trying to make meaningful fights happen.
So I looked it up because we were talking about, what Amazon's deal with PBC is. So it's just basically that they have the rights to distribute all PBC's fights. So it's kind of like, any contract, like, if ESPN and Top Rank kind of deal, you know what I'm saying? So, it's basically along those lines. Amazon Prime is going to get a real big cut of any of the pay-per-view numbers. That's again probably why every fight that's on with PBC is pay-per-views at this point, because they got to get Amazon their money.
Yeah, and I guess now's a better time than ever. What's a better time than now to get into Canelo Alvarez versus Edgar Berlanga? That's also a great thing to hear that Tyson and Jake Paul is free on Netflix. Not obviously really for us, right? But we do get the rematch between Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano, which is more for us, the diehard boxing fans. And I do appreciate, that Jake Paul makes that a part of his cards.
I'm not watching that Tyson fight, bro. I'm just there's no way in hell I'm not watching that. I'll watch Katie Taylor and Serrano because how big a fan I am of them individually, but that fight, their first fight is a classic. After that, I'm turning that shit off. That's just my opinion.
I feel you, bro. It's tough. It's tough. It's a tough one. It's tough with how old Mike is, man.
I mean, look, and I don't want to get too deep into the woods on that. I think we're both kind of on the same page. But for those of you who are going to watch that, my only question to you is, what purpose does that fight serve? You know what I'm saying? If Mike Tyson wins, the response is going to be, well, he should. He's a knockout artist. He's a former heavyweight champion. He should beat this guy who's, yada, 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 who's a YouTuber or whatever. If he loses, then it's going to be, yeah, he's damn near 150 million years old, and his body has been nowhere near what it was, in his prime. Look, man, I barely watched him and and Roy do it, and I thought, okay, we got to see it. It was fun. Let that go. You fighting a dude half your age, cut it out.
Yeah, I to some extent I agree with you, Keji. I do feel a little bit obligated to watch it, but it's tough to watch, your heroes fight when they're in their late 50s and their early 60s, and they're not what they once were. And we just don't want to see legends get hurt. It's not a fight that moves the needle as far as the rankings, but it is what it is. We don't have to worry about that for a little bit. What we do have to worry about is Canelo Alvarez versus Edgar Berlanga. Let's go with the obvious. Let's start with the obvious. Not the fight we're asking for, right? Not the fight we've been asking for. We've been asking for Benavidez for the last couple of fights now. At this point, that fight seems like not as much of an option because Benavidez has moved up to light heavy. And I think Canelo, in light of the Bivol fight, is a little more reluctant to move up to that weight. But Berlanga is probably a top 7 guy at his weight. He's a mandatory for one of them belts he's got. He's not an easy fight, but I think it does. I don't know if it doesn't strike me as a duck. It strikes me as a sidestep. And I think that we've been so used to Canelo being a real athlete through his career for the most part that now he's making businessman moves, and people don't like it. And I just wonder, and it's not my favorite either. I just wonder if people remember the precedent, that Floyd set, where Floyd really didn't ever give us what we wanted in the moment for the most part. And I think now Canelo's doing it and people are sour to it. But when Floyd did it, they go, oh, he's a cool businessman, and I wonder if people see the irony in that.
I think that Floyd definitely had a victory tour, right? We all understand that he had the I'm gonna make my money tour, right? Canelo's in that mode, bro, and he's 65 fucking fights in. Like let's not forget, Canelo's 34, but he's been fighting since he was 17 years old professionally.
I think 15.
Come on, bro. 15, bro. You know what I mean? This dude's been in the game longer than most people fighting have been alive. So shut the fuck up with that noise. That's the way I feel about it. I don't care whose feathers that ruffles. Is Berlanga the guy we want to see him fight? No. Does Berlanga have a chance? No. I'm going to disagree with you on one aspect. I think it is a super easy fight for Canelo because if you take the last 10 Canelo opponents, right? I don't think Berlanga beats any of them. And these are guys that he beat easily, again, with the exception of, Bivol at 175. But you take any guy he's fought in or around 168, and I think Berlanga has a hard time with them. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you look at Berlanga's record, and post the knockout run, the knockout streak, it's been unimpressive, bro. Like even his most recent knockout win was against a guy with a really padded record, and that's to be nice. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just not impressed with Berlanga, and I don't think, in addition to that, I don't think Berlanga's advanced enough from that knockout where he was at the knockout streak to really be in anywhere near Canelo's atmosphere. If Jaime Munguia couldn't even barely touch Canelo, worth a damn, right? I mean, I think Munguia landed 3 or 4 like really solid punches on Canelo, and Canelo walked right through them. What are you expecting Berlanga to do? Because let's face it, if Munguia and Berlanga were to fight tomorrow, I would bet the house on Munguia to win that fight.
That's a good point. He probably does beat Yildirim. That might be the only one. Yeah, listen, aside from not having fought at a certain level, right? Edgar hasn't really fought an elite guy at his weight. He's also struggled at the fringe contender level. And so when you're not passing those tests with flying colors, you know, the excitement around you fighting the absolute best guy in your weight and one of the best pound for pound guys in the world, people are just not going to be that excited about it. There's things to like, right? You get the Mexico versus Puerto Rico, that's always going to sell. Edgar talks a good game. Edgar does hit hard, so that does always kind of linger. But even if you're not going to fight Benavidez, we'd rather see Pacheco. We'd rather see Billy. There's other guys that are kind of waiting in the wings that I think have proven themselves at a certain level in a way that Edgar hasn't. And so, listen, Canelo's like I was saying, this is not my favorite pick. He's in his mid 30s. He's been doing this for almost 20 years, and he's got to pace himself a little bit. And it's not the matchup that we all want to see right in this moment. The thing that I wish he would do is I do kind of wish he'd drop the belts. I do kind of wish he'd let them belts go and let some other guys compete for some titles, because as a superstar like that, you know, he's already become undisputed. And when you're not, you know, going to fight 4 times a year and defend each belt, you know, do one mandatory for each belt every year, at least relinquish the belts if you're in businessman mode. I guess that's what I wish he would do.
Yeah, I mean, because let's face it, you know, the way the belt system works now, you can give up all the belts and become a free agent 100%, right? Because let's be clear, when you have all those belts, there's a, you know, you're pigeonholed to them also. But you can drop all those belts and they'll come up with some Emiratus diamond platinum wrapped in gold belt to give them anyway.
So I don't know that he's as stuck to them as of, because there, you know, there's fighters that are not superstar fighters that rely on being a world champion for their credibility in the sport. But when you get to be a Canelo Alvarez or an Inoue or even a Crawford, like, the belts have less of a significance as far as people really understanding that you're the best. Like, I don't know what belts Tank Davis has. I just know that Tank Davis is a superstar. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, it's, you know, again, you mentioned it earlier. It's the Floyd Mayweather effect. Floyd fought without belts for a large part of the latter part of his career, and nobody gave a shit. You know, and it's, you know, Manny Pacquiao come back right now and sell out a stadium, bro, stateside. You know what I mean? No matter who the fucking opponent is. You know, you Tank Davis. I think Bud is kind of getting there now, you know, where people are starting to buy in a little bit at the end of his career. You know, you know, Ryan Garcia, for all the shit that he's got going on, he shows up. People are going to show up to watch him, whether he's got and he hadn't won a belt yet. You know what I'm saying? But for some reason, people want to hold Canelo to this like standard above even all of those guys. Like, what are we doing? This dude has done it all. He's dared to be great. You know, it didn't work out, but he is not like he got knocked out in his dare to be great. He ran into one of the best guys, period, in boxing, and he lost a respectable match. But other than that, he's been lights fucking out in his weight class. I don't think he has anything else to prove. I don't have a problem with the Berlanga fight as much as I don't like Berlanga. I don't have a problem with Canelo doing it because he just gave us Munguia, right? And a lot of people wanted to see that fight. I think he proved to people like, hey, this is, you know, okay, I'll do this just to shut some people up. I think if he could fight a Morrell, he could fight, you know, he's got options. He can do whatever the fuck he wants. I'm okay with it because of what you said. This is that Puerto Rico versus Mexico. It's the young kid who flapped his gums. Now Canelo wants to shut him the fuck up. I'm cool with that as long as the next fight is something we either want to see or that's worth seeing.
Yeah, I mean, at least he's being relatively active. You know, we get to see Terrence Crawford every 16 months, but, you know, at least we get to see Canelo twice a year pretty consistently. I just, you know, I think back on how many times he did give us the fight that we wanted. And the only time he really didn't, you know, the first Triple G fight took a couple years to make. I wish that had happened, you know, a little quicker. But he's really given us the fights that that we want to see a lot of the time. And I don't like the idea that I don't feel like he's scared of anybody. I feel like he knows what it takes to get himself ready for a certain kind of fight. And with 65 fights under his belt and on an almost 20-year career at this point, I just think he knows how to pace himself, and he knows how serious David is. And he's not, he's not making excuses. When you ask him about it, he goes, yo, he's high risk. He's a big guy. He comes in, he's 200 pounds, this and that. He's just telling you for real. Yeah, and I don't really like it either. I want him to take the fight too, but it is what it is.
And let's be clear, people forget he asked for those fights too. It wasn't that he just said okay to the fights we wanted. He asked for Bivol, right? He wanted that fight. He could have taken any fight at 170, 5. You know what I'm saying? He asked for Floyd. You know what I mean? He wanted the other Charlo. He got the smaller Charlo because the other Charlo was going through some shit. You can't blame him for that either. That fight kind of stunk. But again, you can't blame him for that. He wanted the Triple G fight. It wasn't like Canelo was ducking these fights and they finally caught up to him. So I think people don't give him credit for that either, which is ridiculous.
Adam, the 34 is not just the 34, it's the ring miles, right? You're talking about the guy who went pro, he's 15 years old, there's 65 fights. Listen, there's guys that are longtime amateurs that go pro in their late 20s and early 30s. When they're 34, it's not the same thing as Canelo at 34, who has been fighting since he was a teenager. Jesus Sam, I know how you feel about Canelo, bro. And listen, hopefully one day he fights David. I hope he does too, bro.
Berlanga is just as big as what? Is he saying he's just as big, like star wise?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure about that one. Let's think about. Let's move forward for a second to a real sleeper of a fight, at least to me, the one I'm kind of excited about. Erislandy Lara takes on Danny Garcia. We got the fake out on this fight about a year ago, where there was press releases. It was on the Barclays Center website, and then the fight just never happens. We finally get it on this card. What's your temperature on this fight? What's your level of excitement here?
I would have been much more excited if it happened a year ago, one, and if Danny Garcia was much busier. I mean, Danny Garcia hasn't fought in a long time. And it's probably the only reason I have him losing this fight is because Erislandy has been busy as shit. You know what I mean? Like for him, especially. So, he's been the more active of the two, obviously. And I think that he's doing better in his later years than most guys are. So I think Danny is for me though, like I've always been a fan of him. I think he's got, a ton of natural talent, but is his head still in it, right? Like is he just here to make money and go back to partying with his sisters? I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? Like this is kind of an interesting fight for me because talent wise, I would lean towards Garcia, but as far as just what I've seen in the ring recently, bro, I'd be a fool to not pick.
I mean, even talent-wise, to be honest, bro, I just feel like Lara has also proven a certain quality just consistently throughout his career. He's never really given us one of those performances where we go, oh, man, he's slipping now. He's just kind of always stuck around and been at the top of whatever weight class he's in. Hopefully, when it's all said and done and all wrapped up, he gets his flowers. I personally, like you said, especially with Danny being inactive, I think that there's a potential that Lara kind of dominates this fight. Danny's never fought at a weight this high. There's a couple of reasons, couple things in Lara's favor, for sure. Activity being one of them. Also, him having fought recently. But it also does seem like, and this popped into my head the other day, like, I wonder if him and Canelo being on the same card means, at least in his mind, I'm not saying this is actually happening, but does he think like I could get a rematch with him one day?
Whether he does or he doesn't, that's not going to happen. But yeah, I mean, he might. You know what I mean? Like, and I shouldn't say it won't happen because of Stranger Things, right? But I think that Lara, what I was trying to say is, I think there's a difference between skill and talent, right? It's like the Adrian Broner effect. Adrian Broner is probably one of the most naturally gifted people athletically, right? But he lacks skill because he's not putting in the work. Erislandy Lara is probably one of the most skillful boxers, period, right? When you're just talking about the skills that he has in the ring, the tools that he can bring because of that hard work that he's put in. I think Garcia is one of these just naturally gifted guys, right? He's got natural talent that he just woke up with. But to me, Lara is the more skillful guy and he's more active. So with that, yeah, I'm with you. I think that he if he doesn't knock him out, he dominates this fight and it'll be bad for Garcia unless Garcia can get in there and land something crazy, which wouldn't be out of the scope because of that natural.
It's just a tough style matchup because Danny's always kind of had a hard time initiating offense with his feet. His feet are a little bit stationary, and so he's a great counter puncher, right? So if you make that move and he can catch you, he's really great at that thing. But Lara just doesn't give you those opportunities traditionally. You know, if you put a lot of pressure on him, you can kind of force him into a dogfight on occasion, right? Like Jarrett Hurd did that, and Gulo was able to do that. But for the most part, man, he's able to keep fights on his terms, and I think that's a lot of, you know, his success. I just don't think Danny has the size or the physicality. But you got to give Danny props for taking the fight, man. I mean, I know we'd like to see him in the ring more, but he is also another one of those guys who has kind of fought a who's who of his era. You know, him, Sean Porter, the superstars of the era, right, didn't always fight all the guys, but guys like Danny Garcia did. And I think that, you know, that's worth giving praise to.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, I got nothing but respect for Danny Garcia. Like I said, I was a fan, you know, but I damn near thought he retired. You know what I'm saying? I was like, damn, is he retired? Like I see him partying with his sisters all the time, and he's still talking about he's a boxer. But I'm like, bro, you're not boxing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like I love Eddie Murphy, but he's not a stand-up comedian anymore. He's an actor. You know what I'm saying? It's like, bro, you haven't done stand-up and you know, since I was a kid. Like, let's cut it out. So, you know, I think it's that. It's like, you know, if you're not boxing actively in there against high level guys, because again, it's one thing to take a couple of club fights here and there, but you're fighting Erislandy Lara, bro. We're talking world class, you know, and I haven't seen you in there with another world class boxer in a very long time. So I think he's in for a rude awakening.
Since Spence.
Right. Right. And think about that. How long ago was that fight? So we're talking, you know, the last guy you fought worth a damn was Errol Spence. You haven't been with anybody really on that level in a long time, and Erislandy Lara has, and he's made easy work of most of his last couple of fights. I think you know, and who knows? Danny Garcia could be training his ass off this whole time. He could be in there, yeah, but training and fighting, two totally different things, right? It's like you said, Canelo's been fighting too. There's a reason why he's, you know, we get to see Canelo fighting, and I think that people forget one of the best ways to stay good at your craft is to fucking do it. And I think, you know, again, unless you're Floyd, unless you're Manny, and you just wake up one day and you're that guy, right? You need to be in the ring fighting. And I think Danny Garcia is a guy who, yeah, he's talented, but he's not that talented. He needed, I think, in order for me to have him closer in this fight, I would have liked to have seen him, you know, a couple months ago or a year ago. It's been a while. So my money's on Lara, bro. But I think it's going to be a good fight as long as it lasts.
And my hope too is that, you know, should Lara win this fight, that he can kind of get in the mix with some of the other big names at middleweight. You know, he does kind of exist on this PBC island, but I would love to see him get in with Hamza Shiraz. I would love to see him get in with Janabek. I would love to see him get in with, you know, Shane Mosley Jr. There's a couple of fun guys at middleweight that we just haven't gotten to see Lara in the mix with. So, you know, hopefully that's something we can see in the future. It's a couple interesting other fights on this undercard. We got Caleb Plant and Trevor McCumbee. We got Rolling Romero and Manuel Jaimes. We got Stephen Fulton and Carlos Castro. That's a hell of a fight. Nibs, what of all those fights kind of stands out for you? Ooh, we can't hear you, bub. I'm going to go ahead and guess that Nibs is having some technical difficulties. Not the first time that's happened on any of our shows. I think the first one I'll get into quickly is Caleb Plant and Trevor McCumbee. This is a fun matchup. It's two contrasting styles. McCumbee hasn't really fought at this level, but he's super aggressive. He's undefeated. He's got a pretty record. You know, we kind of know what Caleb's about. We know he's a slick boxer. We know potentially he can fade on the back half of fights at times. But we know that when Caleb gets up to a certain level, that there is a certain quality that he can deliver on. And I think ultimately the question is just, can McCumbee hang, you know, at that level? You know, the real sleeper to me on this card is Stephen Fulton and Carlos Castro. Castro a couple of years ago was one of my like kind of guys to watch.
Can you hear me now?
We're good, bro. We're back.
All right. Go ahead. I cut you off.
No, but you know, there was a time a couple of years ago before he picked up some losses where I thought Carlos Castro was a pretty serious prospect. You know, lost to Brandon Figueroa, lost to Luis Neri. Those are two of the guys at the weight at the time. And, you know, I haven't gotten to see him since then, but he's a guy with a lot of talent. And I think that, you know, if Fulton's not fully on his A game, Carlos Castro could give him a tough time, man.
Yeah, I'm extremely interested in what Stephen Fulton looks like. His first fight back from, you know, the devastating loss from Inoue. And he took some decent amount of time off, you know what I mean? So I think that if he comes back and he doesn't let what happened against the monster affect him, you know, and he can resemble anything like what he was before that fight, I think he wins this fight pretty easily. I think he can box circles around just about anybody not named Inoue anyway. So I think he should win. But it's one of those things where we got to see it first, right? We got to see how much that affected him. And, you know, I think this is a perfect opponent to prove it. So
yeah, it's good to see him in with good opposition. You know, it's good to see him in with a tough guy who is a bit of a contender himself, that at one time was a pretty hot prospect. And, you know, Fulton himself is coming off a loss, and he's not taking an easy first fight back, and at a new weight class. So there's a lot to respect about that.
Do you think I mean, you know, what was that, July last year? You think the more than year layoff affects him?
Of course, bro. I think it affects everyone. It's just how much does it affect you? And do you have an opponent in that can exploit those things? I think that Castro is just good enough technically that if Fulton is not 100%, that there could be some rocky moments in this fight. I think that Castro is very much a live dog in this matchup.
Oh yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, if it wasn't for the Inoue fight ending the way it was, I think that Fulton, I would put all my chips into the Fulton thing. I'd lean into that because everybody knows I was 100% into Stephen Fulton, even though I did pick Inoue to beat him. It was because I had to look into who Inoue was. Like, you know, we were just talking about, I didn't even know who Inoue really was. You know, I hadn't seen him. So when I got to see him, I was like, oh, well, shit. But I think Stephen Fulton is still that guy, bro. Cool boy Steph. As long as he can get back into that, great, bro. But I guess what my question wasn't necessarily will the layoff have an effect? What do you think will have the bigger effect? The way the fight ended with Inoue or the layoff?
That's the big question, right? Because it's different. It's different, not just when you take a loss, but with Stephen Fulton, with Errol Spence, because I look at those fights as kind of similar. You know, you got 1A and 1B, and 1A wipes 1B out, bro. And what kind of effect does that leave? Are you able to come back, from that kind of fight where you get to the pinnacle of the sport and you're just absolutely not at the same level as the other guy. That shit's heartbreaking, bro. And it takes a really great fighter to come back from. So, this is a fight that's really going to determine, I think, kind of the trajectory of Fulton's career moving forward.
I think if anything of those two, I think Fulton's got a better chance of recovery because I think a lot of plays into the Spence thing, right? Spence not just absolutely getting dominated and worked, by Bud, but everything that led up to that. I mean, the guy had 3 major car crashes, that would put most athletes out of commission for a while, and we've seen it no matter what sport you're in. If you have a major crash or a major event like that, it takes something out of you, bro. You're not the same guy when you come back, and that's a dangerous proposition when you're a fighter. You know what I'm saying? You need all your shit running, the way it was to even be competing. So I think Fulton, and he didn't take a beating. He got beat, right? He didn't take a beating. Like he wasn't, his face didn't look discombobulated. He wasn't, he just got his ass, he just got his ass whooped, got knocked out. But I think maybe the time off might actually have helped him. And if it did, and he can kind of get it back to any resemblance of what he was before, I think he smokes this dude and puts himself right back into the picture as one of the guys, in a fringe pound for pound guy if he can get back on track. But again, it's always that first fight, right? Like you said, when we saw Deontay Wilder get stopped for the first time, right? It was like, hey, that first fight back, we don't know what we're getting. And then it'll tell you everything you need to know. So right now, it's purely speculation. Like, we're all fans of Stephen Fulton. We all knew what he was before Inoue. It's after Inoue that we have to see, and again, like you said, earlier, I think it's one of the best opponents, bro, to come back.
Yes, Keji, this fight is at 126. Fulton is moving up. Castro moved up a couple of years ago. Nibs, any thoughts on how the fight between Caleb Plant and Trevor McCumbee will play out?
I'm a fan of Caleb Plant, but this is a tricky fight because Trevor McCumbee is not a slouch. As much as Caleb would like to talk shit about him, not being on his level, Trevor's a guy, bro. He's not like, some bum, coming in and he's just an opponent. But I do think that Caleb Plant is right. He is a level above where McCumbee is at. But Caleb's also had some really hard fights, bro. He's had some really, there's a lot of tread on those tires. So it's one of those things where
that's the slept on narrative, right? Like that fight with Benavidez was pretty fucking brutal. He had some rough rounds down the stretch, and it's like, how is he?
Canelo,
yeah, it'll be an interesting fight. They're both kind of like I was saying, they're sort of direct opposites, right? Caleb's a really slick boxer. Trevor's really rugged, but he's got that glossy, unbeaten record. Caleb's record is a little more proven, a little more battle tested. A really fun matchup. Last topic I want to get into real quick with you, brother. One of the things that frustrates me about this card is all these are fun matchups. They're good fights. It's great that they're on the same card, but at a $90 price point, is this how we grow boxing? Is this how we grow boxing by, putting our fights on subscription services that people already have to pay for, and then putting a second, not small paywall, a second premium product paywall up to to get people to watch boxing that moves the needle? I think it's much easier for people to go, well, I don't have to watch that. If they're not already locked in like we are, I think it's easier for them to go, fuck that. So that's still a frustrating premise for me. It's been part of my frustration with the Saudi involvement is the constant pay-per-views. What is your feel on this card, the price point they have it at, and the value of the card?
I mean, I've been preaching this forever, and I don't know that we'll ever get back to this era. But when you look at when boxing was at its, I call it its peak, right? When casual fans were able to just turn on the TV and watch boxing, right? We're talking, you could watch if you had bunny ears. I'm dating myself here. If you had bunny ears on your TV, not a cable subscription, not a subscription to anything else, you just had an antenna plugged into your TV. There was a time in this country where you could turn on the TV and watch a fight, and a pay-per-view level fight. You know what I'm saying? People forget Muhammad Ali fought on network television. You know what I'm saying? And got paid a guap because you know how many people were coming to NBC to watch that fight, ABC, all the CBS. They used to have these fights on network television. Telemundo does it all the time, right? Pay-per-view is not a thing in Mexico. So if you live in Mexico, you're going to be able to watch this fight for free. And I think
As you
there are
should.
a lot of people, right.
As you should. He should make that free to the Mexican people.
And the reason why is because the country is so poor. People, they're like, can't nobody afford this shit. But they put it on with commercials.
He's a national hero. He's a national hero. It should be free to his people. Manny's fights were free in the Philippines, I believe, as far as I know.
Well, these are third world countries, so you can't. I mean, asking somebody to pay $100 for your fight, you might get two people to do it. So here, because people are making more money and this, that, and the third, we want to charge everybody these absorbent prices. Plus, the purses have gotten bigger, right? Everybody thinks they're a pay-per-view star now. You know what I'm saying? It's the Floyd era, they call it, right?
It's inflated what it means to be a pay-per-view fight, because when PBC start, at the end of the Fox Showtime era, they started putting fights like Andy Ruiz and Luis Ortiz on a pay-per-view. And I think it started to normalize, if it even crosses the threshold of moving the needle, that can go behind the second paywall. Go ahead, Nibs.
I was going to say, just imagine, could you imagine if HBO and Showtime back in the day, the fights they were putting on their regular channel, if they just said, hey, this is a regular channel fight, but you got to pay, $100 to watch it, you'd have told them to go fuck off. Now, the big Tyson fights and that shit, those were pay-per-views supported by, HBO or Showtime. But if you were just to turn on your TV and you turn on ESPN, and now they're saying, oh, well, to watch this fight, pay an additional. Wait a minute, this is on the channel that I'm already paying for. Why do I have to pay more? If you're going to make it a pay-per-view, make it a pay-per-view. But it's like you said, every fight now seems to be a pay-per-view. Every time there's a pay-per-view every fucking month, like 2 or 3 of them. People can't afford that shit, bro.
So I just want to address something Keji said real quick. Turkey said future pay-per-views are going to be $15 and $20. Listen, that's a move in the right direction, right? But we're still facing the fundamental issue of, what am I getting with that subscription? What am I getting with that $25 subscription that costs more than HBO Max, that costs more than Netflix, that costs more than any other streaming service that you got right now? The Zone costs more. So what am I getting for that $25? Listen, the initial slogan of the Zone was the death of pay-per-view, and now it's becoming the home of pay-per-view. Behind, and it feels like the bar just keeps moving. I think even if it's $2.99, $3.99, when it's the second paywall, it's easier for people just to go, I'm good, and it's too reliant on diehard fans.
It's to what you just said. Well, what am I getting for the $25 I'm already paying to have?
Right. Why are Riyadh season cards specifically pay-per-view? Why do I not get that with this very expensive thing that I'm spending hundreds of dollars a year on?
And let's face it, all the other content that the Zone puts on, nobody's watching. You know what I mean? You pay when the Zone first started, it was a great model, because it's like, okay, I'll pay this $25 a month, and then whenever they put a big fight on it, I get to watch it for my $25 a month that I'm paying, right? Now it's, well, I'm paying you $25 a month for some bullshit I'm not going to watch. Then when you actually put something on worth watching, now I have to give you more money to watch what I actually want to watch. Right. Listen, that's the only reason I'm paying you in the first place.
Listen, Rocky Hernandez and Thomas Matisse is a good matchup. Diego Pacheco and Maciej Zielinski was a good matchup. But that's not $25 a month fights. You know what I mean? Though I'm paying a premium price. I really, the truth is, the only fights that should go on pay-per-view are the types that are the Usyk and the Furies, the Crawfords and the Spence, right? We know what the bar is for a pay-per-view fight. And it seems like it's asking a lot of existing fans as opposed to helping to grow the sport. This has been a fantastic show, my brother. And as we like to do sometimes on this channel when we do podcasts together, speak on the importance of local boxing real quick. Like your shirt says. Yes, sir.
Look, man, again, I say this all the time. All the guys we talk about on this show, all the big name guys, started somewhere, right? They didn't all start with, they're not all Lomachenko. They weren't getting title fights coming straight into the pros. A lot of these guys, and even Lomachenko as an amateur, had to start somewhere, right? So they start in local gyms, they start in local communities, and they needed the support of not only their families, but the people within those communities to make it where they're at. In addition to that, we as a community need these events, right? You go to these events, the local economy needs these events. When you're supporting local businesses, period, boxing is one of those businesses. You support local, you're supporting yourself. You get these guys the chance to be where they're at now. I'll never forget, there was a kid that I bought some boxing shoes and gear for, right, years ago. Never ended up becoming a professional boxer. He did the amateur scene for a long time. But he said the fact that I gave him gear to go to a boxing gym got him out of the streets, away from the gangs his brothers were getting into, he met his mentor who was at one of the local community colleges who got him in. And now this dude's working for the city. But he said it all started because he got to go to this boxing gym, which he had no gear for, which I gave to him just because I liked the kid. It had nothing to do with me, and I'm not going to say his name because I'm not going to put him on blast. But even that, right? Not all these guys are going to end up on pay-per-view. They're not going to end up being talked about on platforms like ours. Some of these guys are just going to end up in better situations than they were yesterday. So support your local boxing. You're supporting your local community. If you don't believe me, well, you're blind. What can I tell you?
That was beautiful, my friend. Great show. Thanks to everybody that's been in the comment section watching live. You guys have been fucking great today. You guys keep the show moving. If you get a chance, check out my latest episode of the Slip and Weave podcast. Did a great interview with Ronnie Rios, who's getting ready to fight Nick Ball for his title. That's a hell of a matchup. And we will catch you guys soon.
One thing, I'm gonna be updating our ITR pound for pound. Anybody who's watching the show or watches this later on the YouTube channel, put down in your comments what you feel your top 10 pound for pound should
Love
be.
that.
We'll take it into consideration.
We got the best chat in the biz, right? Might as well get their take.
There it is.